Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they are very well thought of these days. And I would say that this brewery are best known for their different New England, hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their big fruity juicy sours, Berliner Weisses and Goses and things like this. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and it is supposed to be very nice. It's also a style that I know these guys can do very well. So needless to say, I'm quite curious to see how this one turns out. It's always nice to try the new beers from these guys. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. For this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get the Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition. Although on that note, I should point out that this brewery was originally based in Strömstad, a lovely little fishing village quite close to the Norwegian border. They've only very recently moved. But for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters, as it would be in English. So this particular beer is called See You by the Cranes. It comes in at 6.5% ABV. It's another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And this one was released as part of the local småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for May of 2022. And obviously the name is a reference to their move from Strömstad to Gothenburg, the Gothenburg Cranes, of course. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit more about Fermenterarna then. So, Fermenterarna, as I've told you before, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, and they founded the company together back in 2018. So, the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, very close to the Norwegian border, quite a picturesque little fishing village and somewhere that I do hope I can visit at some point in the future. But yeah, both of these guys have quite an interesting story with regarding how they actually got into beer. So for Niklas, apparently he ordered a beer in a bar one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this beer was the Tropic Thunder from Dugges Brewery, brewed in collaboration, of course, with Stillwater Artisanal over in America. And that beer is what you could term as being the kind of cult classic Swedish sour beer, I guess we could say. So when you try that beer and then you see what Fermenterarna are doing these days, you can see the inspiration behind it. But Anna, on the other hand, had a long history with things that ferment, and she also ran the Coasters Trädgårdar restaurant as well. But she had done things like sauerkraut, sourdough bread, all of these kind of things, and so she had a really long passion for fermenting stuff. So that was it, and that was the main reason behind them calling the brewery the Fermenters. Obviously there's two of them, Fermenterarna, the Swedish, so there you go. But yeah, that's an interesting little story about the company there. But they started up with a small 200 litre brew kit in tanks in late 2018. They had to take a break to expand the company after their beers were received very well at some local festivals, and these days they boast a new facility with after that they got a new facility with 2 500 litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres. They were aiming to brew 50,000 litres over the course of 2019, but at this point they had equipment to brew up to 250,000 litres of beer per year apparently. Fast forward though to August 2021 and they moved to a new brewery in Hisingen in Gothenburg, taking their equipment with them. And from what I understand, they now have a new 3,000 litre brew kit and they're just getting that kind of up and running at the moment. They do plan to open up a tap room and restaurant at the somewhere in Gothenburg, maybe at the brewery in the future, so we'll just need to see how that plan kind of plays out. But according to Untappd, these guys have produced around 130 different kinds of beer as of May 2022 when I'm filming this review for you, and like I said earlier, these guys are best known for their different kind of New England hazies and Berliner Weisses and Goses and stuff like this, the kind of modern sour beers, I guess we could say. So yeah, they do some very, very nice beers in both of these categories, and I would highly recommend that you check them out. I actually still have the sour beer that they released last month that I didn't get the chance to film the review for yet, but you know, IPAs, you kind of have to drink them fresh, so that's the main reason behind putting this one out earlier. But you will see another sour beer review from Fermenterarna very, very soon. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Fermenterarna for the moment. I'm sure we'll add more to these notes as history progresses. I can maybe tell you more about the restaurant at some point, and yeah, hopefully we can go up there and do like a meet the brewery with them, and also perhaps a kind of an out and about video when that restaurant opens up. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's get on to the tasting of the beer and have a little look at it. So just a wee quick look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. There you can see the shrimp, obviously referring to the fact that Strömstad is a well-known fishing town. There you can see the Gothenburg crane, and it's got a fermentation tank on it. So yeah, quite a nice little bit of artwork. I might keep this can actually, because I think this is a pretty cool one. So I'll probably keep this one and use it for a display when I do sort out my own apartment here in Sweden at some point. But yeah, this one, you can see it, lovely little gold top on it. But yeah, it looks great. 448 milliliter can this. I believe I paid 50 Swedish kroner, so that's about €5, maybe about £4.25 sterling, something like that, and maybe in the region of like, you know, $5.50 American. The euro and the dollar are very similar these days in terms of value. But yeah, as we said earlier, it's a 6.5% New England IPA, and according to Glassbanken, the hops in this one are Citra, Columbus, Azacca and Mosaic, which we know quite well. All of these hops are American. Citra, 14% alpha acid, big juicy mangoes and quite a zesty, kind of lemony, citrusy type vibe. Columbus, normally used as a bittering hop, about 12% alpha acid, but it has quite a distinctive kind of spicy floral aromaticity. Azacca, that's quite a bright tangerine-y one, maybe kind of mandarin-y, but it's got quite a big orangey character and quite a bit of pineapple from what I remember. I think that's about 14% alpha acid as well. And Mosaic we know very well, 14% alpha acid and juicy kind of tangerine oranges as well. So yeah, this should be quite an interesting beer, this one. As I said earlier, it was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt through Systembolaget in May of 2022. So yeah, let's crack this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting then. Oh, lost my grip on the ring pull there. Yes, there we go. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Oh, that's very pale actually, but it looks nice. So I think we've got maybe about 3/4 of the beer in the glass at the moment. I think this looks pretty good. So yeah, I gave it a bit of an aggressive pour there, so that's maybe a bit bad on my part. A knobhead pour, as my good friend Harry at Blue Nose Beer Reviews would call it. So yeah, I'd just like to have a little look at that head there. You can see this beer is poured with about, about 1.5 fingers of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. There's some really nice, very small frothy bubbles in that. It looks absolutely great, but there are 1 or 2 bigger gaps in there as well. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks really nice. In terms of the colour of this one, it reminds me very much of a kind of mango juice. I always like comparing the New England IPAs to different kinds of fruit juices because this is really just what their appearance reminds me of. But yeah, this one's a very, very bright yellow colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil. Also plays a good role. So the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. A standard wort boil for a New England IPA is about 90 minutes, but any adjuncts that you put in and any barrel aging that you do will affect the colour of your beer too. But when it comes to New England IPAs, or any kind of IPA for that matter, it's not often that you do really have to care about those 2 variables. But yeah, the level of haze in this one, it's not the soupiest and gloopiest one I've come across. When you shine the light through it, it does actually have a little bit of clarity to it, but I'm not sure how well that is going to show up on the camera. But remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast. That varies from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe. There's not a rule about the fact that as as you go up the alcohol scale, you've got more oat and wheat, and thus you should get more haziness and opacity to the beer. It doesn't work like that in practice. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect appearance-wise from a New England IPA, this one looks the part. Don't think we need to say anything else about it, to be honest with you. And you can see the head has calmed down significantly since we poured it. So let's take a look at the aroma then and just see how we got on with this beer. Hopefully it's going to be pretty nice. So aroma time. Ooh, that is quite nice. And come to think of it, I think the last beers that I've had from Fermenterarna, the last IPAs have all been like doubles. I don't remember having a single IPA from these guys for quite a wee while. So that's another thing I need to think about with this. But first impression of this one, I'm going to say it has that characteristic softness. I've always found that the Fermenterarna IPAs have this characteristic sort of soft breadiness and bread crusty kind of thing to them. They're almost a little bit crackery. You get that out of this beer immediately. But I will say the green component strikes me as being a little bit more spicy, and I suspect that that is down to the presence of Columbus. So that's the first impression I get of this one. But on the fruity side of things, it's actually a little bit hard to kind of make out, to be honest with you, because that spicy character from the Columbus is quite is kind of dominating that. So that's a basic first impression of the aroma of the beer. But let's go at it a little bit more in depth and just see what we can get out of this one. This is quite an interesting. I think this beer is going to be quite interesting, both in terms of flavour and aroma. Actually, yeah. There we go. So let's look at that. Yeah. So as I've explained to you before, for me there are 6 different elements to a New England IPA. You've got the kind of yeasty character, the yeasty farmhouse sort of thing, the rye leaning grainy character as well. Those are a bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs, I would say. But then you've also got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and then the kind of sweet side of things. So 6 elements I think you should consider in a New England IPA. Most of the European New England IPAs I think are based on the more wheaty examples from Trillium and the more kind of oaty examples you get from Treehouse. But that's just my impression. Feel free to disagree with that. We don't get so many of the more kind of farmhousey, grainy, rye type ones that you'll get from the likes of Alchemist and things here. But the interesting thing about that, and the thing that set me off to say that, was to me this one actually does have a little bit of a crackery and slightly yeasty character to it. That's the first thing that comes out of this beer in the malt base for me. So for me, this one, you get a bit of Jacob's cream cracker in the backbone. You do get a little bit of this kind of, there's a very slightly woody character to this one as well, I'm finding. So yeah, a bit of a Jacob's cream cracker, a little bit of a woody note, soft bread crust, absolutely. Then on top of that, you do get that, you do get that nice kind of fluffy, you get that lovely kind of fluffy white bready character out of it, which I think is great. What else can we say? If you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, it's interesting because you can smell sort of 2 things going on with the wheat. At the back of the nose, you do get a little bit of that slightly spicy, you get a little bit of that kind of spicy, floral, aromatic sort of thing. Yeah, there's that kind of spicy, floral, aromatic side of things coming out of it. No, I should say that, that's not spicy, floral, aromatic, that's just spicy, wheaty character. Too used to saying spicy, floral, aromatic about hops. So yeah, at the back of the nose you get a little bit of that kind of spicy. I would say it is aromatic though, but not floral. You do get a little bit of that spicy thing from the wheat, but further forward you can smell the smoothness of it and just smell that it's thickening out that kind of that white bready character to the beer. In terms of oatiness, I think there is a little touch of sweetness from the oaty character in this one, but you also get a wee bit of dryness as well. And as I've said to you before, oats for me are a signal of how fresh your New England IPA is. The more creamy the oats smell, the fresher the beer is, whereas if they start to smell a little bit drier, it means that the beer's a wee bit older, I would say that. But yeah, the oaty character in this one takes a bit of a back seat, I think, to the wheat. This is quite a wheaty leaning New England IPA for me, just in terms of aroma. In terms of sweetness in the malt base, I think there's a wee bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. I do get a little touch of sweetness coming out of this one, but it works. I do get that a nice little bit of that McVitie's digestive sweetness coming out of this beer. So yeah, that's definitely worth keeping in mind. That is definitely worth keeping in mind with this particular beer, in my opinion. But yeah, malty base is quite interesting. This is a wee bit different, I think, from some of the other Fermenterarna ones that we've had. A bit more crackery and a bit more sort of slightly farmhousey and yeasty in a sense. So yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of the aroma then. Let's look at this. So yeah, for me, the green component of this is quite interesting. As I've explained many times on the channel, there are 3 different types of hoppings that you can do. You can do early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness. Late addition hopping gives you a little bit of bitterness, but a lot of flavour and aroma. That's the last half hour of the wort boil. Normally a New England IPA or any kind of IPA has a 90-minute wort boil. Not always though, but then dry hopping gives you completely flavour and aroma. West Coast IPAs tend to have all 3. New England IPAs rely on the latter 2. But with this one, it's interesting because you get a little bit of earthiness, which I would say comes from the Mosaic. Mosaic has always had this little bit of an earthy character to it for me, and it's just become quite distinctive to me over the years. And for me though, the green component really leans towards that big, spicy, floral character, and that's Columbus. Columbus, I think, just adds a big kind of spicy, floral, aromatic thing to beers, and that's immediately obvious in this beer. Yeah, you do get a little bit of a lighter and slightly zesty, grassy character to this one for me. So you have got a little bit of that big, spicy, floral, aromatic sort of thing and a bit of a lighter, zesty, grassy vibe to it. But yeah, I really like how this, I do really like how that side of the beer goes together. It gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. Yeah, on the, other than that, I don't think we really need to say so much about the green side of things, but I will say the grassy side of the beer, when you sugar the beer up a little bit, you get a slightly wetter, grassy vibe to this one. But yeah, I like that. On the fruity side of things then, for me, this one's kind of interesting. So yeah, we were talking Osaka, Mosaic and Citra in this, so it's kind of, the fruity side of this beer feels very familiar, to be honest with you. So you've got a wee bit of a passion fruit in there, but for me it leans toward that juicy mango sort of thing. And it's quite a wet fruitiness, I would add, that you get from this. There are maybe little hints of like a dry apricot-y kind of note underneath, I would point that out too. But then for me, you do get a little bit of pineapple from the Osaka, but then a juicy, orangey note to it as well, and a wee bit of a citrusy, zesty kind of thing. I do really like how all of this goes about its business. So yeah, fruity side of things in this beer, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, this is slightly different. I mean, just from memory, I think this is a wee bit different from the other Fermenterarnas that I've had, but I do have to remember this is a single 6.5% IPA compared to the 8%ers that we've had over the last few months from them, I have to say. But yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time just to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it's about time that we have a taste of this one and see how we go. So yeah, this one is the See You by the Cranes, a 6.5% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Fermenterarna, now in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. 6.5%, should be very nice. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, let me see. It's pretty much everything you would expect from a a Fermenterarna beer. It's, you know, just I've drank many of these. I enjoy these Fermenterarna ones, and it's first impression soft, bready, a little bit crackery. Green components not quite as pungent as I thought it was going to be. It's a lot smoother, actually. So that differs a wee bit from the aroma, and it's got that soft, fruity, juicy side of things to it. It's interesting this because, as I say, it does feel a wee bit different from the big 8%ers that you normally that I've had recently from Fermenterarna. It's almost a bit strange. It almost feels a little bit strange to drink a beer that's as light as this, if you like, from Fermenterarna, because the sour beers are always quite big and thick, and then the New England doubles that you get feel quite a bit heavier than this. But yeah, no, again, it is very, very nice. I'm trying to remember, one of the best beers that I ever had from these guys, I think it was simply just called IPA, and it had the one that had the hop flower on the front of it. That was the very first IPA that I tried from these guys, and it was lovely. And in my, you know, it might just be the nostalgia factor, but I've yet to find one that's kind of struck me in the same way. But then again, you always remember the first time that you try something. But that certainly doesn't put me off trying the new IPAs that these guys do. And you always get a good quality one. That's one of the things. But this is very, very nice. It feels slightly different from what we've had, as I say. But yeah, let's break this beer down for you and describe it in the way that we always do. So, middle third of the palate. So yeah, middle third of the palate, then you get a nice little bit. You can feel there's a wee bit of a sort of crackery. You can feel there's a little bit of a sort of crackery backbone to this one, like I say, a Jacob's cream cracker. But at the same time, you get a bit of that typical soft, you know, hedgehog roll type bread crust. You do get a nice little bit of that out of this beer. But then on top of that, you get that soft, fluffy white bread. And it's interesting with this one, for me, the white bread actually feels a little bit wet and slightly more dense compared to other Fermenterarnas that come to mind immediately. But yeah, I do certainly like how it goes about its business, should we say. Yeah, the soft white bread in this one is really good. The other thing I would point out about this is that I do feel the oats come out in this one a little bit more than I expected from the aroma. So this beer does have a few things that deviate quite a bit from the aroma, but I think, from memory, I think the double IPAs do stick to what you get from the aroma quite well, so it's an interesting point, that. But yeah, on top of the soft barley malt white bready layer, you can feel the wheat is there, kind of smoothing it out. But as I say, that's one thing where the aroma and the flavour do actually agree. You get the smooth side of the wheat in the middle, but then it's a bit more bitey toward the back of the tongue. But on top of that wheaty layer, there is a bit of a creamy oaty sort of thing. So as you go down the middle line of the tongue, you can feel it's very, very creamy and oaty. But then as you push out toward the edges of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of dry oaty kind of thing. But this beer is pretty damn fresh, I will say that. It's in very, very good condition, actually. So yeah, you don't need to worry about that. There are one or two little hints of, like, you know, McVitie's digestive biscuity type vibes in the middle of the palate, but yeah, not overly much. The other thing you'll find about this beer is that as you go further into the aftertaste, you do get a little bit of that slightly kind of porridgey type thing coming out of this one. So I do have to say I like that. I do like it. Yeah. Floral, yeah, the kind of floral side of this beer is really coming out more as we drink more of it as well. But as I say, it's a very soft New England IPA, this one. As I say, there's a little bit of yeasty character to this one. The barley malt bread, I think, is prominent. And you've got a wee bit of everything in this. This is kind of showing off four elements quite nicely. The kind of yeasty side, the barley malt, the wheat, and a bit of the oaty character. So really quite nice beer. Yeah, as I say, little hints of McVitie's digestive biscuit the further you go into the aftertaste with it too. Other than that, I don't think there's much to say about the middle third of the palate. Let's go to the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of the palate. Again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. There's a wee bit of a kind of as I say, there's a wee bit of a kind of bready sort of thing. yeah, just a wee bit of a bread crust. But then the base of that back third of the palate, you get more of that kind of crackery and bready sort of thing. It does feel a bit more grainy. Yeah, it does feel that little bit more grainy. And you know, as I always say, the bitter flavours and more grainy flavours come out toward the back of the palate. On top of that, though, you've got a soft, white bready. You do have a kind of soft white bready vibe to this, and you can feel that that is quite tall and it's quite an airy bread. But then you do have a wee bit of a, you do have a little bit of a more, yeah, you do have a little bit of just a more grainy vibe to that beer too. But then on top of that layer, that's when you start to see the more bitey elements of the wheat coming out. This is what I was saying, it's the wheat is very smooth in the middle third of the palate, but a bit more bitey in the back third. So on top of all of that, you get some of the yeasty notes in there, so you can feel there's a little bit more of a, you can feel there's a little bit more of a kind of dense, doughy, yeasty sort of thing there. But then on the edge of that, you get a little bit more of the crackery, kind of woody, bread crusty sort of things. But yeah, this beer, I think, it really does show you that nice, more kind of farmhousey side. And again, you know, when I think about this one being lower in ABV, maybe the single New England IPAs from Fermenterarna show off the more yeasty side of the beer, whereas the bigger ones are a bit more oaty and wheaty and bready, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is a good thing to point out. I do wonder at these guys, when I think about their background, they probably have their own house yeast. So these beers, I think, are quite unique in that sense. But I do enjoy this slightly more yeasty character that you get from these ones. And it does make me think about what I said, you know, more yeasty leaning New England IPAs not being, pardon me, so present in Europe. So that is worth thinking about, because Fermenterarna would of course buck that trend. And maybe Akia as well, come to think about it, and Stockholm Brewing have a few beers like that as well. So maybe that's the kind of thing that's coming back in, the more yeasty, farmhousey leaning New England IPAs, because that's what they originally were. Quite a few of them were like that over in New England. But yeah, the other thing to say about the malty side of this beer, back third of the palate, the flavour is a good little bit taller, but then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, things just squash down a wee bit more. But yeah, hoppy side of things. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. Again, that's Mosaic, and probably Columbus is going to contribute to that as well. But the further forward you come, you get that kind of, you do get a bit of dankness out of this one. You can feel that deep but slightly spicy floral aromatic sort of thing from the Columbus there. Although I would point out that it's a bit oily and kind of smooth in a sense. But round the front curve of the palate, you can feel there's a bit of that deeper floral note, and also a wee bit of a more kind of zesty, grassy sort of thing as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together in this particular beer. So yeah, the green component for me is quite nice, and it does get more smooth and oily the further you go into the beer. Let's look at the front third of the palate then. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up. There's a wee bit of that kind of bread crusty thing, but the base of that front third of the beer, it feels a little bit oaty and also a little bit kind of crackery as well. And on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that. Yeah, toward the back of that front third of the palate, you do get a little bit, you do get a wee touch of passion fruit there, but you would expect that from Citra, but as you move further forward, it really leans towards a very bright, juicy mango, and of course underneath that there are little hints of like a dry apricot, a wee bit of pineapple, which will be from the Azaka as well. But yeah, no, it is, the back half of that front third of the palate is overwhelmingly a juicy mango for me, and just one or two little hints of dried apricot, like I said. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it really becomes very bright and orangey, and there's maybe just a wee bit of a kind of lemony lime just behind the front tip of the tongue. That's Citra, but the orangey characters, of course, in this beer are due to the Azaka and the Mosaic. So this one, you know, the mango and the orange, it feels very familiar on the fruity side of things. So that's a nice point to make about this beer. The fruity side of it is quite straightforward and it works. Yeah, I like this one. Another solid beer from Fermenterarna. So I don't think we need to say anything more about the flavour other than the fact that the fruit is quite wet and juicy. So yeah, I think we can round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So for me, this beer is right in the middle of the spectrum again. It's you know, it's kind of mid-bodied, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, so quite a mid-bodied beer, this one for sure. Carbonation is very smooth. It's actually quite a wet, clean mouthfeel, I think, that you get from this one, but there's a bit of smoothness to it because of the yeasty nature of the beer. In terms of IBUs, I think this is a fairly standard 30 IBU beer. The Columbus, of course, and the slight spiciness you get out of it makes it feel a little bit more than that, to be honest. But as I say, the green component in the aroma comes across as if it's going to be a lot more pungent than it actually is in the flavour. But yeah, lovely blend between the yeasty and malty side in this beer. Quite smooth, a little bit, does have a wee touch of crackery, grainy sort of thing to it. But then the fruity side of this beer is nice and wet and juicy, and you've got a mix of tropical and more citrusy fruit to the beer too. But this is a really nice New England IPA. It's kind of, when I first tried it, I would say it almost felt like it was just missing something a little bit, but I think that's just because it's 6.5 rather than the 8% doubles that I've been drinking from these guys over the past wee while. But it's really grown on me the more that I've drank it actually. But yeah, it just kind of goes to show you how your palate can change a little bit and stuff. But this really shows a more yeasty side to the New England IPA, and I like it. It gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. Try this beer if you get the chance. So what is it? See You by the Cranes. I thought it was See You at the Cranes, but See You by the Cranes, a 6.5% New England IPA from the wonderful Fermenterarna, now in Gothenburg, Göteborg, originally Strömstad, on the Swedish west coast. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.